My name's Des Shipp, and today I'm going to show you how to turn just a normal peg into a winning peg. I've brought you back to my old stomping ground, which is the beautiful Moorlands Farm, which Grant Albert now owns, and he's going to transform this back, I'm sure, to its normal, to its original glory days, if you like. But I've brought you here because many years ago, when I was coming here all the time fishing, it was all about basically catching everything. The carp were in here, but there was a lot of matches that I used to come, and you had to fish for the silverfish, as well as obviously catching the bonus fish, maybe early or late in the match. So I'm going to give you lots of hints and tips today on if you go out, for instance, whether you're fishing a festival or whether you're a club angler, it doesn't matter. And sometimes, we all know nowadays, if you're in a tough area of the lake and you're probably not going to frame, but most importantly is you enjoy the day and try and win your section. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And the things that I've learned over many years is chopworm and caster fishing can be absolutely deadly, and it can sort of basically get you in the top 2, top 3 of the section. White acres for me, the stuff that I've learned from venues like here today at Moorlands Farm has put me in such good stead at white acres, winning festivals because I've been in a tough area. I've obviously fished for bonus fish early. I've fished them for everything that swims, and you obviously maybe get a bit of luck at the end. You might even catch a bonus fish on the gear that you're using, trying to catch everything that swims. That's what wins you festivals, and that's what wins you section wins. So what I'm going to do is, now the first thing I do, I've got my bait ready. I'm going to show you how to chop the worms up and all the bits and pieces that I put in there to make the perfect mix. One of the most important parts of any sort of fishing, whatever you do, is bait preparation. Now, my bait tray is pretty simple really. I've got 2mm pellets, fishery pellets there. Obviously years and years ago, pellets weren't really involved in it, but nowadays they are. They're really important. It doesn't matter what you're doing, pellets are really important. So I've just soaked them. I've put the same amount of water as pellets, and I've left them for like half an hour because obviously I've been setting all my gear up. So they're there, and I'll show you what to do with them in a little bit. I've got a couple of pints of nice casters. So nice fresh casters there. I suppose for an average match, a couple of pints will probably see you right. So make sure they're nice and fresh. I've got a tin of corn. Corn is always a great hook bait, as well as actually putting them in with your worms as well. Because obviously if you're catching the wrong fish on worms, sometimes you can just sit there for a little bit longer, put a bit of corn on, and obviously you can feed this or drip feed this in while you're fishing your worms. But the bait for me today, this is what this film is all about, is worms. So I've got a kilo of dendras. I'm not sure how much I'm going to fish today. Some days I've caught real big weights of fish on very little worms. Other days you've got to put quite a lot of bait, quite a lot of worms in, which is the same with any baits that you fish. You've got to be prepared. Now what I like doing is I take them out of the bag and leave them in like an EVA bowl like that, and then you can I don't like washing them off. I've never have done. I like getting them like clumps like that, and I put them in a separate container, and I would leave them in there like that, and you can see then you've basically got neat worms in there. And if you want to, you can just get this little bit of peat, flick it off as you're setting. I always do this probably an hour before I actually want the worms, so they all ball up, they're all fresh, and they just look proper to me. That's how I've always done it, and I think in my mind it makes a lot of difference. I know everybody does every sort of other things, they riddle them off and that, but I just like to get them like that. So you just pick the peat off as you go in. It takes like half an hour, 45 minutes, and they're just perfect for chopping. Now chopping again is really important depending on what sort of fish you're fishing for. I don't want to chop, because obviously I'm on Meadow Lake today, and there's lots of quality skimmers in here. There's F1, there's some big old wise carp, a few stockies, and I feel like really I don't want to chop them really fine. I want like nice chunks, and that's why I see a lot of people using these worm sort of chopper things. That I'm old school. I just like a good pair of double or triple scissors like that, and I can just vary and see what's going on and get the bait as I want it. So I've got a little 1 pint container there, which I'm going to put my chop worms in. So I just grab a nice chunky handful of worms, not too many. I don't fill the tub right up. I sort of half fill it like that, and then just start chopping. But as I'm chopping, I twist that container around. like that, and I'm just looking at what I'm actually getting. So a nice pair of scissors, and you can see from that, that's what I'm looking for today. I've got an odd big piece in there. Obviously, if you see a whole worm in there, just chop him up, but that's what I'm really looking for, just a nice mix. And then stick that in a tub and then carry on. That's what I'm going to actually chop up in there. So it's probably just over a quarter of a kilo. And I know a lot of people say, oh, worms are expensive. But if you're a match angler like me and you're going out, you're spending the fuel money to get there, your pools money, you know, all your money on your other bait. To be honest, I know it costs money, but worms, sometimes you don't use them. You can keep in the fridge and you can use them the next week. It's just one of them things. So like that. And what I do then, get all these worms chopped up. Doesn't take long. And when I wash worms off, like with some lake water or something, it just never seems the same. And I stopped doing it. I've tried it. I don't know. For me, doing it like I'm doing it, I've always done it like that, and I just think it's just right. I'm not sure why. It's just personal preference. So I'm going to do that in there. Like I said, you can see me sort of turning the little pot there as I'm chopping. That just helps you stop chopping and chopping and chopping. Otherwise you just end up with a load of mush. And I know some days, if you're skimmer fishing, feeder fishing for small skimmers, you know, sometimes that's the right thing to do. But for me today on a commercial such as Moorlands, I think having that mix, there's a few worms, and I'm going to put them back in my tub like that. And just show you what that looks like. Look at that. Just nice. You've got the odd sort of inch chunk. Most of that I would say is probably like 6-8 mil long. A little bit of gunge, and that's what you've got to try and go careful of, especially on a commercial like Moorlands, is you don't chop too much. And that's why I turn that container. It just stops you chopping the same area all the time. So for me, that's perfect. Now, obviously that's my chopped worm. So I'm going to get a 2-pint container now. This is like what I will be starting the session off with. So I'm going to get a handful of my chopped worm like that. Now this will depend on how you feel on the day. But to me personally, when I'm fishing with worms, I like to sort of fish with a lot of worms. I just don't, I know there's days when you can put a worm on the hook over pellets and things like that, but today it's about catching everything, and hopefully we'll get some bonus fish on the way. I'm just going to put a few casters in there, a few pellets, and a bit of corn, and just mix that around and have a look at it. But to me, that's like a really, there's a lot of worms in there, and that's how I want it. It's a really rich mix of worms. And when I'm fishing with worms, a lot of time, especially nowadays, that's how I want it, because I want the fish to pick the worms out. So that's what I'm going to start with. I'm not going to put much of anything else in. So I'm going to turn around now and talk you through where I'm fishing, and obviously what everything I'm going to be doing for today. Got everything set, ready to go now. So I've showed you the mix. I've got my nice mix in there. And it's always gambles how much you feed, and I'm not going to put a lot, even though we are in summer, you know, the fish are going to be feeding. The nice thing about worms is you don't need to put loads in, and some days honestly you can feed very little and catch amazing bags of fish. So I've set up today, I've actually set up a 10-meter line. I've plumbed up at 11, sort of 13, but I come back to 10 and the bottom just felt a little bit harder, and that's the sort of things that I'm looking for as well. Doesn't matter what bait I'm fishing with. And I've also set up 2 short lines. I've set up a top kit +1 and also down the edge. Now that will depend on how the day goes to how I sort of go about things, but that's what this film's all about, and I'll obviously talk you through as we go. But I'm not going to put a massive amount of bait in. Now I'm going to start at 10 meters, and I'm actually going to put in that amount of bait. It's not a lot, but that is this sort of fishing all over. It doesn't matter where you're going, whether you're roach fishing, carp fishing, F1 fishing, don't overdo the peg at the start. So I'm just going to put a little blob in, because that's where I'm going to start fishing. So that's at 10 meters. And I've got myself lined up with a peg on the opposite bank in a nice shadow because I can see me float. And I'll talk you through the floats, the rigs, the hooks when we actually start fishing, just to make sure you've got everything, all the information that you need. Now I'm going to do exactly the same on a Top Kit Plus One, the same amount of bait. So Top Kit Plus One, it's a great line. It might look really short, but honestly, some of the matches that I fished, I've caught big bonus bream there. We all know now on commercials, a lot of the bigger fish do come in on that stony slope. So I'm going to put a bit of bait in there. And down the edge, I'm only going to throw in a few casters. And that's what I sort of call my throwaway line. And it is literally on a short F1 kit. That's what, if I'm going to catch a big weight of roach down there, like places like Whiteacres, I have done such big weights of silverfish, and then you catch an odd F1, an odd carp. They're the bonus fish. It can go sort of get you through, and if not win the section, sometimes win you the match. So I'm going to start it at 10 meters. Make sure I pick the right rig up. Let's talk about rigs and elastics while I go out. I've got 9 Dura slip on there because, like I said, this is about catching everything, but I'm also hoping that I get a few bonus fish. I mean, we all know Moorlands Farm. There's carp in here, there's F1s, there's lots of silvers, and hopefully them fish will play a part today. 015 reflow power line main line. I've got a 4B16 F1 maggot, which is a fantastic float. Anything to do with what I'm doing today, these floats are perfect for it. Simple shotting pattern, a bulk of number 8s, and I've got 2 number 9 droppers. And I've set it so I'm about that far over depth. So basically, like I've always plumbed up for many years, I've actually got, when I've plumbed up, the body of the float is that far at the water. So that's the top of my fingers there on the water surface, and I plumb up like that. I think that's just a great way of starting, and most of the time, unless the wind gets up, or if I want to fish off the bottom, that's the way I fish. And I've also got a little cab pot on there because I'm hoping, depending on how the venue, the day goes, I'll change, and I might have to pot in, I might have to use the big pot and not pot in all the time. Just depends on how the fishing goes. Hook wise, hook length, I've got 011 power line because I am looking for the odd big fish as well, and I've got a 16 SFL hook on, so it's perfect for what I'm doing today. And I'm going to start on a small head of a dendra. So get yourself a nice chunky bit of dendra straight through the head, and then nip it off so it's about 1 inch long. That's what I'm going to start with. Don't chuck the rest of the worm away. I've got my little pot there next door with a little bit of water in, and you'll be surprised, when you're catching lots of silverfish, how many worms you actually chuck away. So don't chuck them away, keep them for chopping later on. So I'm just dropping that straight in. Like that. Absolutely perfect, that. A little bit of float showing. That will probably go down a little bit as we fish it, just a bit greasy. And I've got to make my mind up now on those short lines. The short line to my right down by the reeds, I'm just going to throw a few casters in there. You can always throw a bit of that worm in there as well, but at the moment I'm just going to feed casters. And it depends how I feel about the Top Kit Plus One line, but I'm just going to see what happens. It's going to take a little while, I'm sure, to get a bite, and then hopefully we'll get going. But you never know, sometimes they're on it immediately. Well, there's the first fish within just literally a minute or two. Little baby skimmer, which is great. It's always great to get that first bite. So just a head of a worm. It's that 4B16 float, nice and fun. And that's one good, lovely thing about worm fishing as well. You can fish some days, or a lot of days, I would say, you can actually fish quite positive. So I'm just literally flicking it out, the bolt right over where I put that little, look at that. Oh, come off that one. It might have been, let's make sure, just see a little bit of gunge on my hook length. Yeah, a little bit of slime there. So don't leave that on. I'm always looking for that. Get that off. Obviously, while I'm fishing that, it's really important you think about your other lines. because you might not even use them. So down the edge, like 15, 20 casters like that. Concentrate on the line that you're fishing. There we go. Whoa, look at that. They come out, I love that. They come out like a dolphin. So straight back in, head of a worm. Nice Moorlands Farm skimmer. They're your bread and butter fish. You know, when you're in a tough area, you'll be amazed what weight you can actually catch of them. So get everything to hand. I've got my keep nets in the right area, the landing net ready. Make sure you clean your hook length off, all them little things. A nice big chunky dendra, hook that through the head. And then I'm always thinking about, you know, what size bit of worm to put on. At the moment I'm fishing a bit about that big, but a big dendra. I'm not fishing like a skinny bit. And the difference between putting like a real chunky bit onto a skinny bit from one day to the next is amazing. So a few casts down the edge. Obviously I've got my top kit plus one line. I'm just going to sort of look after that, put an odd little blob of that mix in. Bearing in mind I've been fishing now for just a few, well, sort of 10 minutes, and I've not refed that line, and that's what I'm trying to get as much information. You know, do I cad pot? Do I big pot? The only thing I'm a little bit concerned about fishing out there is if I cad pot, I'll bring everything off the bottom and they could be a nightmare to catch. And that's what, you know, that's something you've got to try and learn. Unless you come to a venue all the time, you just don't know. And that's what I've got to try and learn for today's filming, is how I'm going to top up. I might have to top up really often, I might not. And that goes from one day to the next, and every venue you go is all slightly different. And obviously I've got the option of putting that bit of corn in, there we go, tiny little bite then. Another nice skimmer. That elastic, that 9 Dura is absolutely superb when you're fishing for these sort of fish and you've got a chance of catching an odd bonus. Oh, lovely roach that. Look at that. So that really, them last two fish are probably like £1.25. So you can certainly build a weight up. Beautiful Moorlands Fishery roach arrow. Just clean it off. The worm's perfect, so I can go straight back out. Just try and drop that bolt right on where you fed. A few casters. And I think, for me personally, fishing 10 metres is such a great distance to fish this the way I'm fishing today on this sort of commercial, because everything's easy to fish. It's easy to ship back. It's quick, it's efficient. You can hold your pole with one hand, so you can throw down the edge. And I've always said 10 metres for me, when I'm trying to catch a big weight of sort of everything, if I can get away with it, it's the perfect length. There's no bubbles or anything, which is quite nice really. It's all well and good having it fizzing, but sometimes it can fizz and they're harder to catch. And I can adjust that mix that I'm actually potting in as I go. But I do like, when I'm doing this sort of fishing, and I've made my mind up I'm going to fish with worms, I do like a lot of worms in my mix. So a rich mix of worms. Well, I'm catching a bite every cast at the moment, but I've topped up once. Look at these little skimmers like that, absolutely brilliant. And they weigh more than what you think. But after I topped up, I caught me 2 sort of biggest skimmers. And I think at the moment, what I'm trying to learn is obviously how much to top up and how often. I'm just going to put a little bit more in this time, so it's probably like a golf ball size. I just got that feeling that you're going to need to feed some bait today. And like I said at the start of this film, you never know from one day to the next. I've been to venues, even in the height for summer, where you think you're going to have to feed a lot of bait, and you can feed just a small amount and catch a lot of fish. So still throwing a few casts down the edge. Whether that plays a part or not, I don't know. But that's what I would do in a festival or an open match when you don't draw so well. And I've just started putting slightly bigger pieces of worm on. So probably like 1.5 inches. And let's see what happens. They're right on the feed, and that tells me something. They're right on it. When you top up, it's not been the case where you've topped up, you've had to come away from a line. You want to top up and go straight on it. I don't think in cad potting, you know, see, look at that, look. If you want a classic example of what I mean, that's it. Oh, look at that for a roach. Oh, yes. Oh, hello, steady, steady. Probably a pound, that. Look at that, so that was straight on the feed, that. Beautiful Moorlands Farm roach. Worm still right. I just felt like cad potting, don't think it's going to play a part unless things change. I think there's just going to be too many little fish. So you're going to have to use your big pot and just fish it out and then try and work out. Yeah, look at that. It's lovely fishing. Not had no big bonus fish yet, but don't worry because you're putting a weight together. I mean, that's sort of 6-7 ounces. Probably 8 ounces actually. So that's 1.5 pounds in 2 chucks just after topping up. And just keep your shotting patterns like really nice and simple. I've got literally a 6-inch hook length, 15cm hook length, a number 9 shot, 6 inches, another number 9, and then sort of 7 inches to the start of the bulk. Just keep everything nice and simple. So they're straight on that. Small fish, little perch. You've got to take that, you know, that comes with the territory when you're fishing with worms and casters. But like I said, fishing at 10 meters, everything's efficient. Get everything set up. I've got me tulip there, everything's to hand, everything's quick. I've just hooked a big rudd on the way out. I've done that for a long time. He must have been by me keep net. Thanks for that, oh. Oh, Bob Nud, look. Just keep your hook length all nice and clean. I've changed my worm on there. And I've got the worms that I'm actually using for the hook. I'm hooking them through the head, choosing what length I need, and then putting that into the tub, but to put a little bit of water in it because that stops them from all coming back out. And then obviously I can chop them. You'll be amazed when you're catching, you know, 100 fish plus some days. You'd be amazed how much worms you go through, like just hooking them, and you can just chop them up and put them in your feed pot. So straight down, don't mess about, just get your bulk down. When you're catching well, get it down. I see so many anglers like messing around with their float. When I'm catching, it's literally in, down, like that. So it's bulk, down, like that. Just let everything go down. Just keep your line just behind the float. Little roach. You're just building up your weight. I mean, we haven't been fishing, a little skimmer that. We've not been fishing that long. And I'm hoping that obviously and I've got the option of putting a piece of corn on. In my mind at the moment, I'll probably introduce a little bit more corn because there is quite a few little fish feeding at the moment. So that's the sort of thing that I'm thinking about while I'm fishing. And my thought process of that is if there's a lot of little fish around, look at that, that's a better one. Woo. So you can see the weight, you know, they're building the weight up now. Nice skimmer. I'm not fishing sort of heavy elastic. A nine elastic is quite heavy for these sort of size fish. So you'd be surprised when you're next to someone. I mean, that's sort of like 14 ounces. You'd be surprised what weight you're putting together. And I'm only fishing a 9 really because obviously the bonus fish that are in this lake. So a few casts down the edge. Lovely fish, you know. Another skimmer. These things, absolutely, you know, when you start catching these, they do halfway. You'd be amazed when you pull your keat net out at the end. And also, the most important thing is you're having a great day's fishing. You know, in the tough areas, these are the bread and butter fish where a lot of you guys, maybe in a festival, you know, you might miss out. Where I've sort of like go a little bit to like sort of thinking, well, I might not win the section, but I might come top 3 instead of coming last. But if you get that little bit of a luck, you could call it luck, you could call it whatever, but if you get them bonus fish at the end, they're the fish that can actually win you the section and then obviously go on and actually win the festival or win your section on the day. No matter what sort of an angler you are, whether you're a club angler, an open match angler. And like now, there's a couple of little bubbles just come up. I'll see what happens in the next couple of fish and I'll probably feed again. I think it's definitely going to be another fish then. They're starting to settle down now. You know, we've not been fishing long. It's all just started to kick off now. Make sure your hook link's nice and clean. Check your elastics. I'm just looking at everything. And that wasp. So try and drop your bulk straight over where you're fishing. Straight down. Don't mess about with it. Let it all go in and then concentrate. Like I said earlier, if you fish 10 meters, oh, that was a good bite. Some of the bites you get off the bigger fish are just literally little tiny indications of the float, off the float. Little fish. I'm going to top up again now. Little perch. That sometimes gives you an indication, not always, but it does give an indication that actually, let's get some more grub in. So I'm going to mix a little bit more corn round, like that. And also corn bulks it out as well. So if you think you're going through a lot of worms, you can bulk it out. I'm just a little bit dubious at the moment about putting lots of micros in because if they get fizzing on it, well, that's something you can gamble with. At the moment, I'm just trying to feel my way into the day and trying to work out the best way of catching these better quality fish. Be interested to see what happens now. Not a bite immediately this cast. Just make sure the worm's on. Yep. That is one thing to check with worm fishing. Obviously with a barbless hook, just check it if you sit there for a little bit. So it's just worth checking your bait. Make sure your bait's not as a bite on the drop then. And I think sometimes you top up and they sort of come off the bottom, and I think cad potting at the moment, I think you'd have problems with getting the fish off the bottom. I think you'd have a bit of a nightmare. There we go. I'm not sure if that's in the mouth, that. It's a funny bite. I think it's a decent skimmer, eh? Yeah, he was hooked under the belly, that one. I think that's probably what happened there, is I fed and they just come off the bottom a bit. You do get a bit of that. You've got to put up with a bit of that sometimes, especially when the fish are feeding. Let's get another nice big piece of worm again. So I've actually put a bigger piece of worm on since I started, but you can always go back later on. That's something you've got to vary as you go along in the day. And it normally comes apparent what's sort of the best size of piece of worm you want to put on. Little liner then. And I think if you were cad potting, you'd be getting so much problems today That was on the drop, that. Little roach. Well, I say little, it's probably 3 ounces. That's what I said. "10 metres is such a nice length. Oh yes, lovely that. Literally just settled. Straight down. So topping up at the moment with a reasonable amount of bait is definitely the way forward. And definitely putting a lovely net of fish in, weight builders, which is what we want. Got another lovely skimmer on now. I'm just going to talk about what I've actually done, because it's really important. That is what's so lovely about this style of fishing. I've just had a couple of nice big skimmers, one about 2.5 pound. They just got slightly bigger. Let's talk about what I'm doing, because that's what this film's all about, is showing you guys what goes through my mind. And what I've actually done is I've changed my mix around slightly, because I was fishing, the fishing was good. I was catching a lot of these sort of 4 to 5 ounce, 6 ounce fish, the odd better one, a few little roach, a few little perch, and I thought, you could just tell the fish wants some bait by topping up. But I just thought, right, one, I was going through a lot of worm, which is fine if you're catching the right fish and you've got to put a lot of worm in. But I just felt I needed to sort of put more corn in, a few more micros, cut the casters out at the moment. You can always go back to them, but that's the mix that I'm putting at the moment. I've got a few of the worms that I've chopped up at the start, but look at the difference in that. Lots more corn, quite a few more micros. And like I said, that's what's so good about this style of fishing. You can change and adapt to what's happening on the day. And I've put in now probably a ball in like that. Again, probably the same size as a golf ball when I'm topping up, but completely different mix. And the difference is unbelievable. Still fishing with worm on the hook, which is nice. But obviously you've got the option of putting corn on. Just another nice big piece of worm. And I think since we've started, I've topped up 5 times, 6 times. And we reckon we've been fishing for about 1.5 hours. So that's how fast I've changed. Let's see what happens now. No fizzing, which is nice. Just an odd little bubble now and again. Oh, look at that. The bites are really nice as well. There's an odd, you always got to put up an odd little fish here and there. That's that's the nature of the beast. But the difference at the moment in size of quality of fish is completely different. I've just cut them casters out thinking, are they dragging fish in? Because obviously casters, there we go, look at that. Casters obviously sink really slowly. I'm trying to pin these fish on the deck. I just want to take that cad pot off, to be honest. I've not used it yet. That's one of the smaller stamp ones that I've had since we've been putting that different mix in. But it's quick. And so many guys, I think so many anglers miss out on this sort of fishing, especially if you're a club angler. And it makes you a better angler, shipping in and out, feeding, you get much, much better at fishing, which is what it's all about. Look at that. That might be Percy the Perch, that. So let's put another bit of kit in. Yeah, better Percho. So I'm going to put another blob of that mix in now, because they are right on it. So it's same sort of amount as what would be in like a golf ball size. Dump it in. Got my roller set up at a nice angle. All the little important things. Obviously I've got all my other sections by the side of me there. If I do hook a big fish, I can stick them on. Let's see what happens now. I've been topping that inside line up, throwing a few casters there, but at the moment I'd be a fool to come off of this. The fishing's so good and I need to be on it. I need to be concentrating, feeding it. It's not one of them days where you're definitely like topping up and leaving it. Let's see what happens now. I might have to go back to a bit more of a rich mix, I don't know, but I just felt then that I needed to sort of change things around, try and get them better size fish in me peg, and it definitely worked. You might have to sit there just a little bit longer for a bite, but the stamp of fish makes up for that. There you go. Oh, that come off that. That was a good skimmer, that. Just check the hook bait. If you see anything on your hook, just bring it back and check it. There's a tiny little bit of slime on there. There's one thing I can't stick is like having anything, a bit of slime or something. You're better off just, and that's what's so good about fishing the length that I'm fishing. Everything's like efficient, nice. Just had a couple of little bubbles come up there as well then. Look at that. Absolutely nailed that. Nice skimmer. Probably 14 ounces, that one. You can think how fast you're catching. Look at them. Beautiful fish. Same bit of worm, not fussed about that. It's not going to be one of them days where you've got to change your bit of worm every time. It's basically get in there, ship it out, concentrate on how you drop your rig in, bulk, straight down. A bit of lift bite then. Oh, nick me worm. And sometimes it's all different. Sometimes you can put a lot of corn in. Just put a bigger piece of worm on a minute. I've not hooked any sort of big fish yet, but that can change. Honestly, you can go from doing what I'm doing to catching big F1s, carp, really. And a lot of venues I go to, if I know I'm going to be fishing like this, I'll actually set a carp rig up for the same line, just in case. Look at that. Lovely fishing, honestly. Just slightly bigger piece of worm. Not one of the big skimmers, but still putting weight in the net. It's definitely the case if you're going to have to go through quite a lot of bait today. They are absolutely all over that bait. And a little fish that time, though. As I said, you have got to go through that, but that is on a slightly bigger piece of worm, that. Just put another chunky bit of worm on. So I'm just going to get one of the biggest worms in the pot and just put a head on. And little things like that can make a huge difference. And they're the things that I've learned over a lot of years of fishing different venues. It might not, it might, some venues completely put the right piece of worm on and you just get a completely different size fish. I think the wind's changed about 15 directions since we've been fishing. definitely cut down on the bites though, having the little fish are back at the moment. Another perch. But don't get too sort of, you know, if you get a couple of them, you just got to go through that. As long as it's not too bad. And like I said, I can put a piece of corn on. If I get another one this time, I'll put a piece of corn on just to see. There's a bite on the drop then. If you just think all the ounces you're putting in your netto. And that's what this fishing's about. You know, you just think, oh, I'm not catching many big ones. You have your little runs of quality, you have your bonuses, and then at the end, that 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds some days of all those sort of fish you don't normally think about make the difference. Another perch. I'm just going to put a piece of corn on. Looks like they've just changed a little bit. So a bit of F1 corn. See what happens with that. You never know. You would think that would go under like immediately if you've been feeding it from the start, but it doesn't always work like that. There's a little bite then. Oh yeah, that's on a corn, same size fish though. Another skimmer. So I'm just going to top up again, even though I've only just topped up. I just feel like I need to top up again. And this is where you can vary it. I'm just going to put a little bit more worm in there. Just to make it a little bit richer. Just going to go straight back on a piece of worm again, see what happens. And there's obviously you can put a whole worm on. You know, if you think there's a big fish in your peg, if it starts fizzing, you're struggling a bit, you can put a bit more line on the bottom. That's why I normally set up 2 rigs for that one line. One more positive, bigger hook, thicker lines, you know, slightly thicker elastic. But it's never felt like that. I've never felt at the moment that there's been big fish in me peg and I can't catch. Another little fish at the moment. This might be the time now where I need to come short. Obviously priming that up. Maybe the fish have just moved short. Yeah, another skimmer I think that. That's what I want, just want these skimmers because they're the weight builders. These are the ones you pull your net out at the end and you think, God almighty, they do weigh. I mean, that's like 6 ounces. Just coming short now. That long line, I've actually had a nice little run and I've started getting a few little fish, but I've just come in short. Started off with worms, I've been looking after it with the same sort of mix. Not, you know, obviously concentrating on that long line. And I thought I'd just put a piece of corn on. And up to now, the fishing's been brilliant. And the amazing thing is, corn out long, I've had like 2 or 3 fish on it. And I've just started throwing a bit of corn over the top. And that's what you want, you know, some of the venues I go, look at that. And it's like, I don't understand where I think the bigger fish have moved in. Because I did catch some nice ones out long. And I didn't get bitted out, but I just weren't catching them big skimmers. So what I've done, I've gone in there with a bit of worm on. It was all right. I caught some smaller skimmers. I just thought I'll put a piece of corn on and just start throwing. Look at that. Just started throwing a bit of corn over the top. And this is what can happen for you, you know. You can transform it. What I'm going to do at the moment, I mean, this might not last long, but I'm still potting in long. Probably like, I'll try and sort of time you, because that's important. I would say every sort of 25 to 40 minutes out there. If I'm still catching short, I still want to make sure I put a bit of bait out long. Still chucking a bit of caster down the inside, but really speaking, I think this is good enough out in front of me not to even bother with that. See, that's just gone a little bit like, I had a few fish on that. And that's what you've got to go careful of, that you might have to just go between the two. So don't think, it's like when I was fishing long, I sort of put a bit of bait in this line. I'm just going to chuck a few more grains of corn over the top and just flick it out past the pole tip. Because I know what these skimmers are like. They do come off the bottom a lot. You might not necessarily catch them shallow, but they love baits on the drop. So I only fish a top kit +1, but you can have to do some damage there, and you can catch some of the biggest fish in the lake, you know, big carp, big F1s, big bream. It's not all about fishing long. There you go, lovely bite that. And every fish I've caught have been that size. They've been like these 14-ounce fish. You know, them sort of stamp. They're proper weight builders, them. You get these rocked up. So I've got a 4x14 F1 maggot rather than a 4x16 on, because it is slightly shallower. I just thought it just feels a bit better for a 4x14 rather than a 4x16. So a few more grains of corn. There we go, look at that. Bit of a smaller one, that. But it's obviously, when you come in short, it's so much quicker if the fish are there. That's what's so nice about a bit of F1 corn as well. You can get these little tiny bits. And I think they're absolutely deadly, them little tiny bits of corn, for this sort of fishing. F1s, skimmers, crafty fish. You see that now, it's just, since that wind swung round right to left, I think it's just starting to skim through against the wind, which is really nice. I've plumbed up exactly the same, just the body out of the water about 1 inch. I'm just going to lift and drop. There are a little tiny indication then. There we go. Nice big skimmer, that. Yeah, that's the ones we want. Look at that. I've had a couple of them out long. Well, I'm sure, look at that, look how clean that is. Probably a pound and 3/4, that one. Well hooked. Corn still on the hook. Same hook, 16 SFL, same elastic, 9 Jura. Just flick that out. Just about 1 metre past the pole tip, let it come in, little bit of corn. I just thought I'd try it, and I went in there and worms was all right, but I just Just thought I'd put a piece of corn, like I would out long, but I've just started throwing a bit of corn on this line rather than sort of big pot in it. Oh, that was a bite, I should have had that. I was half asleep. There we go. And if this carries on, this, you know, this happens to me in matches. Just bigger stamp, weight building fish. So nice and simple, little bolt, 15 centimeters of 011 power line. Just hooking the corn, so there's plenty of hooks showing. You could even probably get away with a 14 hook. So flick it out just past the pole tip, let it come back. Sort of 6 or 8 grains of corn. Look at that. Whoa. There's nothing like that out there, honestly. These fish have definitely moved in. Another pounder. Great fishing, right up my street. And you guys, honestly, you know, if you can get into this sort of fishing, if you don't draw particularly well, you don't fancy your peg, no matter what venue you go on, just try it. Just go a bit careful on venues where it can be a bit too shallow in short sometimes. I'm only fishing a top kit +1, you might have to fish a top kit +2. But that will depend, to me, that will depend on where the silt, oh look at that, where the silt starts. So I'm just going to do a little bit of mix in my pot, not for the short line, but for the long line, because I need to top that up again. That's what you always remember, is look after your other line. You know, throwing a few casters down the edge, that is easy. You can do that by hand. You're not wasting no time at all, where if you want to top up that long line, you are wasting a bit of time. Only a few, you know, a minute or so, but a bit more corn on that line. You know, I'd probably try and take 3, 4, 5 tins of corn with you, because if it is a day like today and they start having the corn, you can certainly go through it. There you go, tiny little bite there, never even took the float under that. And then hopefully, with a couple of hours to go, we can actually catch a few bonus fish, and that's what this fishing's about. Some days it doesn't work out, you know what I mean, like any sort of fishing really, but the days it does, it puts a massive smile on your face, because you've gone home from a, you know, not such a good area. One, you've had a mega day's fishing, and two, you might have gone home with a few quid in your pocket. And you get a lot of respect for fishing, I think, when you sort of, you know, you catch from a difficult area, a nice weight of fish. And I think that's probably where I've sort of made my name, really, in sort of fishing this way. On some of the venues I've been to, people say, God almighty, how have you done that from there? And this is how I do it. If that starts moving, we're in trouble. That was the bottom. I thought I just hooked Moorlands Farm catfish then. Just trying to get them nice little pieces of corn. It's really important, like it is with worms. Sometimes you can just put a little piece of corn on, you'll get a bite of chut. If you put one of the big pieces on, nothing happens. Look at that, lovely that, isn't it? Ooh, look at that. Oh, needs to be in a circus, that one. Beautiful fishing. Different stamp altogether. probably £1.5. Again, nice little tiny piece of F1 corn. Just flick that out. Simple fishing. Wind's really tricky at the minute. Oh, look at that, tiny little bites. Just felt when I plumbed up, the top kit plus one was like on the stone. I've not already seen any bubbles come up there at all. But I'm not bothered about that. I'd rather sort of like have no bubbles and getting a bite of shark and having loads of bubbles where you can't get a bite. And if it goes a bit quiet, I can obviously pot in. Let me just pot that long line again. Just going to look after that long line while I'm doing that. A bit more worm in that. And this is what you've got to think about. Think about if, you know, you might not need to use it, but you've got to look after it. It's only taken 30 seconds to do that. Back in short again. And I'll do the same. If I come off of this, I'll dump a few micros, bit of corn, a little bit of worm in again. So if it carries on like that, I'm afraid I won't be doing much else. Not with the stamper fish. That was on a real small piece of corn as well, that. And just imagine now the weight that you're putting together. And you can fit this fishing round the start of your match. If you're fishing for carp at the start, you know, this is the sort of thing where mid-match, especially on a lot of venues where it goes a bit dead, if you have that sort of 10, even if you just have the 10 metre line, you know, you might not have to feed it at the start. You can feed it after an hour or so, and you can go in there, keep the fish going in the net, keep your, you know, you're building your weight up, and obviously you can come short or down the edge later on for your bonus fish. But that 20, maybe, you know, whatever weight you catch at 10 metres, for instance, that makes the difference between, you know, you winning your section, getting in the frame. And for me, that's what fishing's all about. Got a lovely, nice big fish on now. I've had an absolutely amazing time. Going between the two lines, even on that corn line short, you just couldn't quite keep the fish coming. On that long line, definitely smaller fish, but I've just hooked this one on half a piece of worm. And this is what it's all about. This is what this style of fishing is all about. Obviously, having corn there gives you the versatility of, one, if you're not catching the right fish, and like I did short, you can start throwing a bit in. There's no problem, even though I've like cupped in worms and a few micros there, there's no problem at all in throwing a bit of corn in over the top. And that's been really good. But these fish, oh, look at that. Not sure, I don't think it's an F1, I think it's a carp. And with that nice non-elastic, you know, they're not belting off, thank God. And 0.11, you know, gives you a massive chance of getting it out. Nice big carp, that. And this, what can happen, you know, you might go in late on in a tough area of the lake where there's no carp, and then all of a sudden you've got a huge weight of silvers and you get a few bonus fish. And if I'd have been in the match today, I'd have probably fished for carp at the start, see if I could nick one while I'm just waiting for my 10 metre line to settle down. just see, because you might get lucky, you might get one or two, and that's what my fishing's all about when you don't draw so well. Just sort of concentrate on this one a minute, because obviously I don't want to give it too much stick, because I am not, I'm not fishing overly heavy. And I actually just had a nice little run of skimmers short. I fed that long line 15 minutes ago, dropped in there, caught a little skimmer, seen a few bubbles come up, dropped in again, I put a slightly bigger piece of worm on and caught this lovely carp. And I think it's a great fish to actually finish this film off. Look at that. I might have caught that one 15 years ago, you never know. Really want to get him out for the cameras now, to be honest. Just finish this film off perfectly. So I've not adjusted anything. All I've adjusted is me feed, what I've put in. Yes, that'll do nicely. That's a lovely fish to finish it off. Well, first off, I'd like to say thanks to Grant and letting us obviously film here today. He's a good friend of mine, always has been. Best of luck with him with this fishery, because it is an awesome fishery. And I hope that you guys have enjoyed it, picked some tips up on, whatever sort of style of fishing you do, or wherever you go, try the chop worm and caster with your core and a few micros. Just be careful with him. Woo. He's not very happy, the sun's just come out. But there you go, a beautiful Moorlands carp, common carp. Probably £8. You get a few of these in the last half an hour or hour to go, and you can go from being nowhere to either winning your section, great points in a section when you're fishing a festival, and even making the top 3 of the match that you're fishing. Let's get him back. Just caught an £8 carp last chuck. This is on my 10-metre line. I've just gone straight back in, half a worm. And I've just hooked this fish. I think it's probably an F1. And this is what this fishing is all about. I've had a mega day's fishing. I've got a big weight of silvers, skimmers, going between the two lines. The short line was good on corn at one stage. And that sort of dried up. I kept looking on my long line. So I've just had an £8 carp and I've got a nice F1. And I think that's a great fish to finish this session off. It just shows you, catching 30, 40, 50 pound of silvers. Sometimes obviously the fishing's not as good as that. And then catching these bonus fish at the end. Like I said, I've just had an £8 carp. That F1's probably getting on for £2.5, £3. It just shows you what can happen. When you don't draw great, but you want a day's fishing and you can come back from the brink. Sometimes there's not a chance of probably competing from parts of the lake that you draw. But if you take the tips, the little, everything I've showed you today, like I said, that short line, when I went in there on bits of worm, it was okay. But then I started chucking a bit of corn there. I could catch skimmers. I have a real good spell of like proper skimmers there, like pound fish. But that long line, just looking after it, don't forget about it. I forgot about the inside line. The inside line, to be fair, I've not even picked up because the fishing's been good. And I've had to concentrate out there. It's not been one of them days where I've had, you just had to keep concentrated. It just felt like you needed to be there feeding it and not leaving it too long. If I'd have had 3 lines going today, I don't think I would have caught what I've caught, unless I'd have got lucky down there with maybe some big fish. But there you go. It just shows you the power of fishing nice rigs, chop worm and caster. Don't forget about your corn and your micros, and you can have a great day's fishing. Well, what can I say? I mean, what a venue. It's always been good to me, Moorlands. Over 25 years of coming here. Like I said, thanks to Grant for letting us fish. You can see the size of the skimmers. There's all the big roach there, just flicked out. But I've had a couple of carps and I've had 3 big F1s at the end. And like I said, this is what this fishing is all about. Making the most of maybe not the sort of greatest peg on the day. Look at the skimmers, roach, hybrids, 1 big carp, probably £8, some big F1s. And I'm sure, we've not fished like 5 hours today, and I'm sure it just got better and better. Going between the 2 lines, starting off with lots of chopped worm, varied it a little bit, you know, more corn, a few more micros, and amazingly going for the 2 lines has been absolutely fantastic. So there you go, let's get them back as soon as possible. But there you go, I hope you've enjoyed it, I hope you've picked some tips up, and don't forget to like and subscribe on this video.